All right, hello. I would like to welcome everyone to our monthly Tableau Tuesday webinar series. Thank you again for taking time to be with us today. My name is Brian Medeiros, and I'm a senior solution consultant with Tableau, coming to you live from what was yesterday a blistering hot Southern California. And I'm excited to talk about some advanced analytic topics. And we're going to go through three different features that are new or fairly new to Tableau and maybe really new to you. And that's using set actions and parameter actions and extensions to really take your analytics to the next level. A couple housekeeping items. This session is being recorded. And if you do have questions, you're going to need to leverage the Q&A portion of the WebEx. So not the chat, but the Q&A. And it should be listed in your panels that you have hopefully listed with users. There's a Q&A area. If that's not the case, if you hover down towards the bottom of your WebEx session, several bubbles will pop up, and there will be a little three-dot ellipsis, and you can click into that, and there should be a Q&A option to pull that up. We'll be monitoring as we go. My manager is on the line, Steve Martinez, and we will also open it up to questions at the end. Okay, before we get into it, I just want a quick shout out to our next month's topic, and that'll be held on Tuesday, July 9th at 9 a.m. Pacific, and that's going to be around embedded analytics. So it's actually going to be the inverse of one of the topics we're going to be talking about today, which is extensions. Extensions is going to allow external applications to be embedded within a Tableau dashboard, so within our portal, as opposed to embedded analytics is really the inverse of that, where you can embed Tableau content into your existing either intranet or portal. All right, so the first exciting topic we're going to talk about is set actions. And this was introduced in version 2018.3. Some people have quoted that this was something that is the last most exciting thing was LODs, and then set actions came along. So one of the things I want to do real quick is just level set on what is a set. So for those that haven't used sets or don't know what sets are, they're really a custom field that or custom fields that define a subset of data based on some condition. So the idea is I can create these sets, or sometimes people call them groups, but there is a difference, without really having to filter. So they're predefined, and you can do those and create those in several different ways. And how do they really differ from a group is dimension members can only really belong to a single category when it comes to a grouping within Tableau. So using sets, that same dimension, an example, a cat or cats could exist in many sets. They could be in mammals, they could be in furry things, they could be in animals with bad attitudes. They could also exist across multiple dimensions as well. Sets can be referenced directly in calculations, which is really powerful. They can also be combined in very interesting ways. So I can create a set that is a combination of two sets. I can also create a set that shows me all values that exist in set 1, but not in set 2. And then I can also even show values that appear in both sets. Again, the ways we can create sets, we can create them manually, so we can select an actual manual list, as you can see here in the illustration on the left here. We can, and this might look very familiar if you've used sets before or you've used filters, very similar type of dialog box. I can also create conditionally computed sets, so I can pull out all my products where my profit is greater than a certain amount. In this instance, it's actually 0. I could look at top and bottom rankings as well. And then with that, we introduce set actions. So once we have sets, we now can create within a visualization an interactivity that will dynamically filter out that subset, without actually using filters. So any selection that I make within a viz is going to pass that set of values through that set action, similar kind of similar to what we would do as filtering with our old actions, our standard actions, our dashboard actions. And some of the things we can do is part to rest comparisons. We can do part to whole comparisons, intersections, some benchmarking and market basket analysis, and some proportional brushing. And so what this is going to allow us to do is really add more rich context to the information and show how it relates to other pieces of information within our data set. All right, so let's take a look at how this is going to work. So if we look at something like this, where we have a list of our sales reps here, and we have our a chart at the bottom here that shows our sales over time. In the normal filter action instance, I can simply click on Chad, right, a single entity, and I can see his trend over time, right? And I can see some spikes here where he's done great sales over these certain months and not so great in these months. I could even select a set of these, and I'm getting an aggregation, right, of these 4 selected sales reps, and I can see that, okay, they could be doing good. I see, spikes go up, spikes go down, but how does that relate to, the rest of the field out there? So that's where set actions would come into play. And so let me remove my filter, my quick filter here, and see how this changes what we're doing. So in this instance, I'm passing a set to the bottom filter. So when I click on this particular rep, I can see now how does he compare to the rest, right? So this is the rest of the field here. So now you can start to see things in context, right? That we can see that, hey, he's done pretty great overall across all these months, but in some areas not so much. And the same thing holds true if I select a set of these different reps. Now I can see an aggregation of, and you can see that this indicates the set of in versus the ones that are out of the set that I've created. So I can see that, wow, in November or January of 2015, these 6 reps we're kicking some butt here, compared to the rest. All right, I'm going to show one more example, and then I'm going to show again how we create these actions, and then go through some other use cases. So one of the other things we can do is a part to whole comparison. So what we're looking at here is a market value of teams playing in the 2018 World Cup. And we can see over here on the right-hand side that we have about $9.4 billion in market value, and we have 32 teams. And so what I can do is, as I start to select, say, Spain, and I want to just hone in on here, I can get a great comparison. So, prior to this, if it was a filter, it would just always show 100% here. But now I'm passing Spain as a value and looking at how that proportionally exists across the whole. So I can see that 10% of my entire market value is basically spread across Spain, and it's really just one team. So it's 931 million. I can also then select within a tooltip. This is something that a lot of people aren't aware of as well. Is you can create tooltip selection criteria here. So I can select all of Europe, and I could take a look at what Europe did. So we have 14 teams, and it really makes up well over half of our market value here. And so the idea here is we're able to create this Pareto type concept and easily doing this through set actions. And if I wanted to explore this further, I can start to see maybe South America, ends up being, their market value ends up being very close to the percentage of the number of teams. So that relationship's pretty close and even there. Again, I just want to illustrate, if I turn on my filter here and let's select Africa, right? What could be misleading is, and let me select all of Africa. Okay, give me a second second here. Um, all right. All right, I'm going to do it a different way because I'm just going to select this. So what could be misleading is if I have a regular filter here, I can see that my market value is 1.6 billion. But again, that sounds like a lot, but is it really a lot? So as soon as I uncheck this filter, I can really see that it really only makes up 18%. So it's really, it allows you to go to that next level and add more context. All right, so let's see how this is created. So if I go to my map, all I need to do is create a set here. And creating a set is really quite easy. I can just select a set of marks here in my view and click on this icon here and say create a set. And I don't have to create a set for every single possible value. I just need to get a set created because it's going to dynamically push through a set action the values that I'm selecting within the visualization. So I'm just going to hit OK. I called that countries. And then in my pie here, I'm going to take this set, which as I start to drag this, you can start to see that it says in/out. So anything that's going to fall in my selection is going to be split out here. So what I have currently selected over there makes up 16% of that. And I'm going to also do this on my market pie as well. And then let's go back to our dashboard. And then it's really just a matter of creating what is a set action within our normal action dialog box. So let me go back here. So under dashboard up at the top here and actions, we have some new options in here. One is parameter actions, which we're going to show you later, but we also have set actions. So change the set values is what it's called. So I'm going to click on that. And I have to have a target, a source here. So my map is going to be my source. And my target set, and actually it's already defaulted to the data source that we're using, but you could also target other data sources as well, which makes this really powerful. I can also select, do I want this on hover, select, or menu? So similar to if you've done dashboard actions before, those similar type of options. And I'm going to target my countries set here. Hit OK. And then now when I select this particular country, right, I can start to see, or I select all of South America, I can see that pie split out, both from a market standpoint and from a number of teams, how it represents to the whole. Some other things you can do. So if I had another sheet like this, and maybe it already had countries, and I'm going to put it in here as part of the breakdown between our market value by position. So this was a sheet that was already out there. Because the set action is just passing values to this country set, and this country set exists within this visualization, it's just a matter of adding this as another sheet within my dashboard, and the action is going to work just the same. So now when I select on particular states here, or sorry, countries, I can see how that represents from a whole. If I select Argentina in particular, we could see that right-wing players, their market value is very high, and a lot of that has to do with the famous Lionel Messi. All right, let's move on to another example. And again, a lot of these, I'm not going to go through the plumbing of every single one of these. I just want to give you the concept and then just show you some other additional use cases. So this particular one is actually passing parameters to a calculation. So what we're looking at here is particular products that are falling either below or above our profit line, and how that relates to the amount of discount that we're giving on these products. So we can see that we're giving a large amount of discount here, and so we might want to know more about this, and I can select these, and I want to know more about how each one of these compares to everything else outside of that. So I can see that these are the sales is very large and we're not profitable compared to all the other. And this comes up a lot, and people ask, well, how did you get to show this, all these products versus the other? So let me show you how that works. And it's really just a simple calculation. And if we open up our selected product calc here, it simply is saying that if selected products, so selected products is our set, then show just the product name. So if it doesn't fall within that selected set that we selected, then show and then bucket everything in others. And then that is what we're using up here on the top in our rows to represent that. So again, it's passing anything we select from the top, showing what's in and out, and then it's bucketing it by this calculation. Another cool use case for set actions is some market basket type analysis. Second to reset this. So if we look at market basket analysis, we could click through each one of these, and let's click on tables. And what's interesting we see here is we would expect our proportion of sales across our chairs probably to be a lot higher because we're selling tables. So, it might be that we're just not bundling things properly, we're not marketing properly to people that are buying tables, some of the selection of chairs. And then we can also progress through this and click on a particular customer here, and we can then, or multiple customers, and highlight over here what they've bought from a subcategory standpoint. So Nora in particular has bought, bought products within these categories, so that she's bought some tables, but hasn't bought any chairs. Again, leading us to some actionable insights to where we might want to maybe market or bundle things differently. All right. The last one I want to show, which is something I just recently got my hands on, and I think it's a really great use case, is let's pretend this is a survey, right, that we send out to our customers. And so we have 3 different questions here, right? And this could be around customer sat. It could be around, the likelihood they would buy our products. And here's the answers, the multiple choice answers that we've provided for them, A through G, in each one of these questions. And up here on the upper right, we have the total population. So we sent out 793 surveys out here. And so what you can do here is, if I wanted to know, all right, how many people selected A, right, and maybe disliked something. And then they also answered, so we could see, actually, before I move forward, we could see the breakdown of how many customers answered A for question A. So 243 answered that, and 550 answered gave some other kind of answer. And so what I can do here is now traverse down into question B, and also say, did they answer A or E in question B? So they answered, A for question A, and then A or E for question B. And we can see 207 answered that, and we could even traverse even further. So it's this type of and with nested or conditions, so that I can go through and figure out, what people answered, to better get insights into where we might, again, market to them, right? Or understand what these customer sat issues are causing and rectify those. Okay. The next thing I want to cover is parameter actions. So parameter actions was introduced in 2019.2, so the latest release that just came out. And again, I want to level set with what is a parameter. So parameters are dynamic values, or constant values for that matter, that can replace, well, they're dynamic values that can replace constant values using calculations, filters, or reference lines. So, an example of this would be, I can create a parameter that says quota, and I can have the end user, I can put in a static value, say of 500,000, and then I could use that in a calculation to see, what sales reps have exceeded or or haven't reached quota. And then I can also expose that parameter control and allow the end user to input values to do what if type scenarios. Another great use case is showing the top 10 products. So instead of having something hard coded with the top 10, you could replace that fixed value with some dynamic parameter so that the end user can put in, hey, I'd like to see the top 20 or I'd like to see the top 30 products. And with that, now, similar to what we saw with set actions, where I can interact with the visualization in order to pass those values to a set, same concept. So now I can pass those to a parameter. So I can have the end user in this example kind of interact with the viz, and then I can pass either filters like my region here, or reference date, or a sales threshold, to various either calculations or filters or reference lines. The other use cases you could even, because SQL queries can be parameterized, you could even have those values get passed to a SQL query. So in order to define a parameter action, you must include a source sheet. So it's going to be very similar to what you might do when you create a dashboard action. So you need to have a behavior like a hover, select, or menu, and then a target parameter, which is the source field, and then you could even define what an aggregation level as well. And then a parameter referenced in an action must also be referenced in some part of the visualization. So that either has to be in some calculation or a reference line or somewhere where you're feeding that parameter into the visualization. All right, let's take a look at some examples around parameter actions. So here's a very basic example I wanted to start with to just show that based off a selection within a visualization, I can start to feed the parameter. And we can see that these are the parameters I exposed the minimum and maximum date here. So when I select these, you can see that my dates are changing within my parameter. And if I scroll and select a bunch, you can see I've had my starting parameter of September 2016 get populated in my minimum date, and my March 1st in my max date. So let's take a look at how this would work within a parameter action. All right, so for this parameter action, currently I just have the minimum date in here, but I want to create a maximum date. So we can go over to, in our dimensions pane here on this drop-down arrow, and I can say create a parameter. And I'm going to call that max, select max date. I'm going to create a date here. And then for that max date, I'm going to come to my analytics tab, and I'm going to drag in a reference line. And I'm going to select my select max date. So what's happening here is I'm basically referencing, this reference line is sourcing that max date. And that max date right now is just a static value because parameter values either have to be loaded in or you have to type them in. So they need to be, they're going to be static. But they're going to be dynamic in the sense that when I select something within the view through parameter actions, it's going to update that. So I'm going to hit OK. And let's go back to our dashboard here. And let me expose that parameter on here, the new one we created. Select max date. And then simply, we're going to go to our dashboard, actions again. And this time, instead of the set value action, we're going to use the change parameter action. We're going to do this on select again. And then we're going to target our parameter. select max date. We want it to control the order date, and we want the aggregation to be maximum. So now when we select this, like we saw before, there we go, right? So here's our max date, and our selected max date is getting loaded into our parameter. All right, let's go through some other examples. This one's is really cool. What it's doing here is anything we select, any point within this graph, and what we're looking at is some cryptocurrencies, and we want to know the percent difference if it's gone up or down from a particular point that we select. So if I wanted to select this particular crypto or this particular date, it's going to baseline that at a 0, and then the calculation, all these are going to be percent different calculations from this selected criteria. And you can see that it updated this reference date up at the top here. And what we've done here is we have, if we take a look at this and look at this calculation, our percent difference, we used our built-in table calc to create that calculation, and then we just modified it to load in the reference date. So instead of having a fixed date out of the data set, like order date here, we would just plug in our parameter, right, our reference date parameter. And then through a dashboard parameter action, we would then pump in the user selection, and that's how we're able to change that, that criteria. All right, here's another example of where we can click on our particular KPIs up here and change the view, right? I can click on discount, and all my graphs are going to change to discount, profit, and sales. Now, this may be, if you've done this before, this is creating a parameter with those measure values and then toggling. You could have a drop down with that same action, but what parameter actions are allowing you to do is kind of change the UI a little bit, allow you to have these type of button-driven stuff instead of maybe a drop-down list or a type-in list, because parameters don't give you as much flexibility, say, as quick filters with the way that the users can interact. But with the parameter actions, it gives you some flexibility to do things like this, where I have kind of almost like button-driven and interactivity, right? So from a UI, it's just a cleaner design. What this is also doing is we're also able to pass, if we go and edit the action in here, we can actually pass values to our measure names field. So this, allows us to just have those measures in the view and pass them through and filter based off the measure names themselves. All right. Another just very quick example, similar type of example, but this one we're filtering across multiple data sets. Now, I could do that with a quick filter, but again, it gives you just a different type of interactivity. It also it could perform better because actions typically happen after all the data has been queried out, where if you've used a lot of quick filters in the past, or you've even used quick filters across multiple distributed data sources within a dashboard, you might see some performance degradation. So this will actually, you should see some performance enhancements by using these type of actions. Okay. This particular one allows us to pick, let me reset this, allows us to pick and force a selection of all 3 of these before any action is taken. So what's going to happen here is I have to pick, so if I wanted to focus in on Texas, I could do so. And then I could focus in on binders. I had to select binders, and then I have to select consumers. And as soon as I do that, and it is based off me selecting something in each one of these graphs, I can then show the detail. So, the idea is you have this natural guided analytic that you want the user to go through before you expose the final result. Okay, and the last one I want to show as far as parameter actions, and this is actually another great use case, is and is also showing off our new satellite imagery map, is that I can drill, say, from a map like this, and maybe I want to focus in on Texas. I can drill into Texas, and I can drill down into the cities. And now I can see all the cities, and then I can select, one mark or several marks, and then I can drill down into the zip code. And this is actually a cool use case because it's combining both parameter actions and set actions. So if you've ever done this, is actually using a technique that we call like sheet swapping. So each one of these is a different level. So you have the state level, city level, zip code level, and through the dashboard, through the parameter action, it's actually swapping the sheets. But at the same time, and let me go into our actions, it's actually passing sets down from each level. So here's my 3 different geo levels to take me to the different levels of the map, and then my different sets to pass those set values down, from state to city to zip. So this is a cool example that it combines both of the things that we've discussed today. All right. The last thing we're going to cover is dashboard extensions. And this was introduced in version 2018.2. And we're going to talk a little bit about, what are they? Why should we care? Will they fit the mold? Will they not? Who the target audience is? And we'll go through some different use cases and show some examples. And we'll talk a little bit about security. So what are extensions and why should we care? So the idea is that we're enabling the business user and an analyst to interact with other applications directly in Tableau. So if they spend a lot of time in Tableau, there may be external applications that you want a Tableau dashboard or visualization or Viz to communicate with, bidirectionally, and so that a user doesn't have to bounce back and forth between different applications. So it extends our capabilities across our platform to fit different organizations' needs. These developers, there is a developer component of this. They need to create some of the plumbing behind this, leveraging the APIs, but then once that is built into a dashboard and published up to the server, then there's the end user doesn't know anything about or need to know anything about the underlying or the plumbing behind it. So they're built with our extension API, and programmatically, the Viz is going to interact with the dashboard when you select filters or marks or change parameters. Again, it is a custom code that would need to be built. We do have an extension gallery out on the web. If you search Google for Tableau extensions, there is some hosted functionality that we're going to show here in a minute. And once the settings are saved, so there's particular settings to these extensions. Once they're saved in the workbook, they'll persist. So anytime somebody leverages that extension, you don't have to go through the configuration component, and I'll show you more of that in a second. Why would it fit the mold? I mean, customizing tooltips and filter changes, sending data elsewhere, so like write-back capabilities or creating calculated fields would fit the mold. What it is not for, it's not really for data connectivity. It's not a replacement for Extract API or Web Data Connector. It doesn't work really for custom calculation functions for the analytical pane objects or in story points. Target audience, so you got the developer side, which would have some, need some skill sets, API, familiarity, web development, maybe JavaScript, HTML, and then the audience just needs to know how to use the extension, how they click on a dashboard, interact with that extension. Here's the components of a extension. So you drag an extension in. It references a extension file or a manifest file called TREX, which has where that extension is being hosted. This extension has to be hosted on some kind of web server somewhere. and then you input some values, you configure it basically, and then it's off and running. The extension has a two-way communication between Tableau dashboard and the extension itself. All right, let's go through a few different use cases. So one we're going to talk through is write back, so being able to interact with the dashboard and update values and write back to a backend source. Example is this maybe somebody, and this is something we do internally in Salesforce, where a Salesforce dashboard extension, you might click on something in Tableau. You might want to embed, some kind of Salesforce component in there so that it fills in the values and then you submit it. I found it interesting. I've had this in my slide deck about Salesforce for some time now. Interesting with the recent news that happened yesterday, but this is a great use case for using an extension. One that's getting people super excited, as you can see, is dynamic parameters. So in the past, parameters were not dynamic in nature. You couldn't add new values, say from a data source. Now you can through a dashboard extension. Another great use case is integrating with other custom chart types, maybe like D3, and I'm going to show you an example of that. And then just partner integration through, automated insights or narrative science that do NLG, which is natural language generation, describing what's going on in a dashboard now, not to be confused with NLP, which is our Ask Data, which is a new feature in our platform. Okay, let's go in and look at some examples. So the first example I'm going to show you is an inventory example. And this is a write back example. So I'm going to drag my extension. So there's a new object in my object pane down here in the lower left called extension. And I'm going to drag that in. And it's going to prompt me. Again, here's the extension gallery. I'll just want to show you that real quick here. And the extension gallery is a gallery of partner or internal built extensions. Now, these are hosted either on site at the partner or on GitHub for some of the stuff that we built internally. And so, communication is going to be between the Tableau dashboard, wherever the server's particular might be sitting, and these dashboard extensions. And so what typically you may not want that hosted outside of your organization. So you would typically you could download these as templates, and you could run them on a web server internally so that you could have that in communication all sitting within your network. And I have a mix of this. Right now, this particular example, this inventory example, I'm actually running on a web server locally here. And then some of them I'm using the ones that are already published out there. So how does this work? So I can now interact with my inventory application. So I can click on a mark here, and I can see that I have 50 in stock here. So it automatically populated my 50 in stock and my 25 ordered. And so now if I know I have another 15 ordered, I could simply enter that in, update it. You see that my viz changed. Right, so it has this bidirectional information, and this is writing back. This example is actually just writing back to an Excel spreadsheet, but it could be writing back to a backend data source. All right, the other great thing is the dynamic parameters. So typically, this is an old traditional parameter. So if I went and updated the data in the source, I wouldn't see this get updated, right? This example here is a extension which also gives me a drop-down list, right? Because this traditional parameter, I don't have a drop-down list. So now I'm loading this in from the data source. I have a nice drop-down list here. And then if I bring up my Excel spreadsheet as my source here, just to illustrate this, and I'm just going to paste in Aberdeen, Maryland, and let's save this. And I just need to do a quick refresh on my data source here. and then a quick refresh or reload of this. You wouldn't have to do all this reloading. This would happen automatically once you've published this out to Tableau Server, but it's loading in. And so there you go. So now I see my Aberdeen, Texas show up within my data set. So it's actually getting fed in from the data source. Another great thing we can do with parameters as well is typically, again, they're not dynamic in nature. So if we wanted to set an anchor date, so the anchor date to today, this one is called date parameter, and these last two exist out on our extension gallery. And so when I configure this, I can basically select what I want. So maybe I want this anchor date, and if you read the directions here, if you want current day, just put 2 parentheses. So I'm going to anchor my parameter to current day. Save and apply this, and so now there you go. You see my anchor day is always going to be the current day, always going to be today's date. So I can feed that in through this extension. Okay, a couple more I want to show you here, and then we'll wrap up. So this particular one is leveraging D3 to do a network diagram. So let me reload this one. And now when I click on and let me expand this out, see it? I click on a particular person here. So if I move up the chain here, I go middle, maybe a sales manager, I can see Chris Sale in the middle and all his reports. And so I'm literally interacting with this D3 through Tableau. And it could be either clicking on a viz here, or I could even do it with filters. So if I wanted to do John Farrell here, I could see all the network relationships, right, between John and the people below him and then the people below those managers. So the director to manager to employee relationship here. And then the last one is interacting with our partners. So here's an example of an automated insight and their NLG capabilities. So I can view this as a head of sales, right? And it gives us some natural language stuff. It says out of your 41 sales reps, only 10 of them surpassed the $500,000 quota. And this is a parameter, as I mentioned before, and even if I change this, so if I change this to 300,000, I could do some what ifing, and it's also rewriting the narrative. And it's going to say, now tell me how many have actually exceeded a 300K quota, right? So a total of 22 out of your 41 sales reps. And this is at the top level, and then I could even drill down to my regional manager, and it's creating the narrative here, and I can, in natural language, it's going to highlight all the things that I'm viewing within my dashboard and within my vizzes. Okay, just to kind of wrap up dashboard extensions, from a security standpoint, for those of you that are on and concerned with that, which a lot of people are when we're talking about extensions, is all extensions must use an HTTP secure, HTTPS protocol. When you run it on server, you can add the URL of the extension to a safe list, and that's done. An administrator would have to do that. By default, anyone using the extension will be prompted and asked to allow or deny the extension access. And then there's ways to control access to the underlying data, and you can do some of that configuration within the T-Rex file. And you're going to really want to prevent, cross-site scripting. Again, there's several different configurable things to allow extensions, to not be able to see underlying data, to make sure they're safe and whitelisted. And then just one side note: when a workbook is packaged, the T-Rex code gets embedded within the TWB file, so it's part of the package workbook. So it's the TWBX file. I have several resources in here that, just going out and searching set actions or parameter actions. There's a lot of great examples, a lot of great resources out there, as well as the extensions. There's a lot of information on our developer tool page. We also have an API home to learn more about it, and just being part of the developer community and registering for that, you get a lot of information pushed to you around just APIs in general. All right. So with that, hopefully this got the juices flowing, and you've thought about maybe some great use cases within your environment where you can really leverage these 3 exciting new features and kind of take your analysis to the next level. So I want to thank you all for your time today, and if there's any additional questions, I haven't looked at the chat or the Q&A yet, but we'll review some of that stuff and make sure we answer these questions.
Hey, Brian, one question that I have, let me just take a look at this. One of the extensions that you use, the network diagram, do you know the name of that particular extension?
So that is, I don't know if that one's out there in the gallery. Let's take a look. Or even publicly available. I'm not sure. Let's see. At some point, it was going to be made publicly available. I don't know if that was the last time I looked. It wasn't out here. Yeah, I don't know if we have. I have to see if there's a link to it somewhere. If not, we could provide that.
Okay. All right. So, and Tiffany, you asked that question. So if you can just reach out to your sales rep or your pre-sales person. If not, you can reach out to me. My email address is smartinez@tableau.com, and we can follow up and get that answer for you for the network diagram.